Our topic is the role of colonism on independent language evolution. Language change is variation over time in a language's phonological, morphological, semantic, syntactic, and other features. It is usually studied by historical or evolutionary linguistics. Generation by generation, punctuations evolve, new words are borrowed or invented, the meaning of old words drifts, and morphologically develops or decays. The rate of change varies, but whether the changes are faster or slower, they build up until the mother language becomes arbitrary, distant, and different. There are many different routes to language change. Changes can originate in language learning or through language contact, social differentiation, the natural process, and usage. Language is transformed as it is transmitted from one generation to the next. Each individual must recreate a grammar or lexicon based on input received from parents, older siblings, and other members of the speech community. Migration, conquest, and trade bring speakers of one language into contact with speakers of another language. Some individuals will become fully bilingual as children, while others learn a second language more or less well as adults. In such contact situations, languages are often borrow words, sounds, constructions, and so on. Language relationship with mind, soul, identity, and thought are those who speak in their mother language make most of colonist societies to colonizing other societies focus on language and language identity of those societies. Being aware of importance of language and culture domination during colonism, colonists try to convey their thought, beliefs, and their customs through language as a culture tool in an invisible and impeccable way. Using this policy, they can complete and strengthen their process of penetration and colonism on others. As the result of lingual and cultural weakens, conquered societies submit to colonist sovereignty, and occasionally they have accepted all aspects of their culture and lingual sovereignty. Our instances of language change caused by colonization include Hawaiian, Mughal, and Great Britain.
The Hawaiian language, called Olelo Hawaii, belongs to the Polynesian languages and was first recorded by Captain Cook in 1778. Cook described the language as sounding like baby talk because of the abundance of vowels and reduplication, like in the words Eli Eli and Wiki Wiki. Of course, later it was found out that the language was just as diverse as the others. The language was only an oral language until 1820, when U.S. missionaries came to help them express the language in writing so that the Bible could be translated into Hawaiian. While translating the Bible, they ended up adding many new words to the Hawaiian lexicon, like Anela, Liona, Barita, and Kumu Manau. Their alphabet was made in 1826 with 13 letters, having 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, and U, and 7 consonants, H, K, L, M, N, P, and W. The modern alphabet today has 13 letters because of the glottal stop that was added on as a consonant. The glottal stop is called okina, which is signaled by a left signal quotation mark. Something else that was added onto the language after the alphabet was made is the macron, which is used to distinguish between long and short vowels and is signaled by a dash over the long vowels. These were added later on because they were unique traits that went unnoticed by the missionaries, but they are important because they can change the meanings of certain words, like pau, which means soup, but pau, which means damp. In response to the overthrow of the Hawaiian Queen in 1893, the Provisional Government of Hawaii was created in anticipation of the annexation by the United States. With the Spanish-American War going on and Hawaii being a strategic location for the U.S., their influence continued to grow in Hawaii. The Newlands Resolution of 1898 officially annexed Hawaii and stated that they would become a territory of the United States. Immediately following this, new laws were passed that discouraged the use of Hawaiian in public and private schools, and people were urged to use English. While they did not make the language illegal, children who continued to use it would be strictly disciplined with either corporal punishment or a trip to their house from the school, strongly advising them to stop using the language in their household. Since the language started to become stigmatized, people started using it less and less until it was almost extinct. A renaissance of the Hawaiian language occurred in the 1970s and 80s when people started to become interested in their native culture again. As an effort to save the language, a group called the Hawaiian Lexicon Committee was formed. They created new words for things that did not exist when the language was originally made, such as kame piula for computer and kale pono pa'alima for cell phone. They also opened Hawaiian language preschools. Soon after this, a Hawaiian language course became mandatory in all public schools. Now the largest group of Hawaiian learners are children. There are only about 1,000 native speakers left today, and another 8,000 people can speak it fluently. The Hawaiian language is a prime example of how state sovereignty can have a direct impact on a language. Since becoming part of the U.S., the language has gained a lot of new words, but the number of speakers has gone down drastically. But thanks to the reinterest in the language that started recently and help from various campaign groups, more and more people are learning it. The Department of Hawaiian Health conducted a survey in 2014 where they asked 206 Hawaiian residents about their thoughts and feelings toward the current status of the Hawaiian language. The results showed that all participants wished the language would be used more, and they all favored the idea of a bilingual landscape. One participant said, "I think it helps us to be better Hawaiians, create and foster and strengthen that connection that we have." Since evidence shows that using the native language of a land can have benefits such as improved self-esteem and sense of community, hopefully the language will continue to grow.
The Mughal Empire was a dynastic power in India that came from the collapse and division of the Mongols. They ruled India as the sole power from 14th to the 16th centuries and had a lasting impact on the culture of the region. Looking to the early 16th century of the rule of Shah Jahan, the Mughal Empire had a discernible impact on the linguistics of the region, introducing new ideas and shifting the syntactic conventions, creating the language now called Bengali. This change was the direct result of government policy, not merely brought about by proximity. The image on this page, and this one on the next slide, are both collections from a tribute given to Shah Jahan. You may remember him for something called the Taj Mahal. These illustrations were known as Persian miniatures or maraccas, and they are books filled with illustrations by Persian artists. This image on the second page is actually a depiction of the Hindu epic the Ramayana, with Persian captioning, and serves as an early case for the adaptation of the Persian language. You see, a majority of these changes came at the behest of the ruling elite, who had their surroundings conform to their own desire, hence the Sanskrit writing being recreated in an illustrated panel with Persian text format. This next slide shows the currency of the Mughal Empire. Notice the Persian writing. Because those in power were primarily Persian literate, the language of governance was Persian. To seek patronage from the wealthy required the art to reflect Persian values and culture. To achieve scientific accomplishment required publication in the Persian language. To achieve any status required you operate within the established structures of power, and those structures were Persian. So when the use of Persian had the threat of government force behind it, Persian wasn't an inherently better language, but it was backed by power. The first words to be transliterated or adopted by the Sanskrit-based languages of India were religious. At this point in history, religion and government were often equal and operating in tandem. The use of Islamic teachings is actually just government by a different means. Some of these new words included the names of Islamic texts and new poetic ideas also based on religion. Many of these were then featured in the writings of Sanskrit poets. Their writings appealed to the affluent Indians who in turn were made to be subservient to the Mughals. The inclusion of Mughal philosophies and religion is an indication of desired imitation. Indians wanted to appear Mughal since, as I mentioned earlier, working within the system led to success. This slide demonstrates the bureaucratic impact of the Mughal Empire. The well-oiled machine that was the Mughal Empire introduced such a large state that it became necessary to also embrace a new language. These are all terms that are similar or the same between the burgeoning Bengali and the Persian language. One interesting word is Diwani, which was used to later describe the EIC power in the territory of 24 paragamas. I thought this word was Sanskrit in origin, but it's actually Persian. Now, the final step in the language change of India went beyond adopting new religious ideas. It included the syntactic change of language and the inclusion of Persian idioms in Bengali. Idioms are phrases whose literal meaning isn't the intended meaning. For instance, kick the bucket doesn't mean to strike a pail with your foot, it means death. Similarly, these Persian and Bengali idioms are more closely translated to mean goodbye, rather than the literal English translation of may God be your protector. For the pronunciation, Bengali is Khoda Hafiz, and the Persian is Khoda Hafiz. So you can see there's a striking resemblance between the two. Once the idioms of the newly formed Bengali and Persian had begun to converge, the change was complete. What began as a religious transliteration was given government backing and became the lingua franca, or the language of power for the region. This led to an assimilation towards Persian and an attempt to work with the present power structures.
The third instance of language change we will be discussing is the role British officers played in enforcing the Kikar language. To begin, we'll define Kikar and introduce its origins. The Swahili prefix ki means the language of. The acronym KAR stands for the King's African Rifles, a multi-battalion British force that occupied East Africa beginning in the early 1900s. Together, they form the word Kikar, essentially meaning the language of the King's African Rifles. Kikar is also known as Kikea. This language was formed as a compromise between British officers and their African soldier subordinates. British officers stationed in East Africa did not speak Swahili and were unable to communicate with their soldiers. African soldiers did not speak English and were unable to communicate with their chain of command. In order to speak with each other, these two groups formed a simplified variety of Swahili, and thus the Kikar language was born. The language was used for years throughout the early 20th century. Kikar came to use in every military function, from African soldiers speaking to each other to British officers commanding huge parades. Swahili took over as the official language of the King's African Rifles by the 1950s. This was due to British officers trying to shift the language of command to English, but it proved unworkable with a large number of African soldiers that would have to learn the totally foreign language. The picture on the right is of an African soldier in the King's African Rifles. Kikar was linguistically influenced by three factors: language attitudes, linguistic convenience, and social identity. The first factor Kikar was influenced by is language attitudes. Both European and Asian colonial settlers and British military officers thought of Swahili to be a lowly language. They believed it should only be used to converse on a basic level with their African soldier subordinates. African soldiers were seen as lacking in mental capacities and unable to grasp the grammatical complexities of standard Swahili. Because of this preconceived notion, social groups pushed for the expansion of simplified varieties of Swahili. Kikar was one of the three simplified versions of Swahili that came from this push of simplicity. The second factor Kikar was influenced by is the linguistic convenience of African soldiers. The African NCO soldiers were crucial in the development and implementation of Kikar. They were able to spread the knowledge of the language because of their deployment time. British officers often had very short tours to East Africa, so they were unable to be a stable factor in the implementation process. African NCOs would also teach a 4-month-long training course on Kikar to new military recruits. British officers used their African NCOs as a lifeline to learn this language. The third factor Kikar was influenced by is the social identity construction. British officers who had learned the variety of Swahili felt more distinguished from missionaries and other civilians that were residing in East Africa. Africans who had learned Kikar felt honorable and noble because Kikar was associated with the military forces. Because of the distinction that Kikar brought, the language was pushed and excelled through East Africa. This picture is of a platoon of the King's African Rifles in formation. Kikar kept a simple and regular Swahili structure. It did so by completing noun-class reduction, simplifying complex rules, and omission, substitution, and deletion. One thing Kikar did was noun-class reduction. As Matonya and Parsons stated, Swahili groups nouns into sets containing distinct prefixes for singular and plural formations. Each noun class comprises respective rules that govern the syntactic behavior of adjectives, pronominals, adverbs, and other components modifying the head noun. Native Swahili speakers use 5 pair noun classes of M and WA, M and MI, JI and MA, KI and VI, and N and N, and 3 odd noun classes of U, KU, and PA. Kikar simplified these 8 noun classes into 4 paired noun classes. These 4 were M and WA, M and MI, KI and VI, and N and N. The JI and MA, U, KU, and PA noun classes were all transferred under the N and N noun classes. A second thing Kikar did was the simplification of complex morphophonemic rules. Because of the restructured noun class system, a predictable pattern of plurals was produced. This made the language much simpler to speak. For example, the sound and word structure of the plural form does not change in the end noun class. As seen in Figure 1, Nyumba and Nyumba are house and houses. Tikiti and Tikiti are ticket and tickets. Rizazi and Rizazi are bullet and bullets. Another way that Kikar simplified Swahili was by omission, substitution, and deletion. This was done to detailed and context-sensitive grammatical processes. For example, the copula was deleted in spoken Kikar. The verb to be was understood, although it would be absent from simple sentences. In Figure 2, the simple sentence of Mimi Kalali is I am fierce, with the am implied. Or another simple sentence of Yeye Mbaya is he is bad, with the is implied. A fourth thing Kikar used was lexical changes. These included borrowing and code mixing. English terms were modified by borrowing the vowel ending structure of Swahili words to form many Kikar words. For example, Figure 3 demonstrates bayonetti is bayonet, pistola is pistol, bathy is bath, and scouty is scout. Vocabulary from English and Swahili were mixed within phrases. For instance, kupiga bull is to hit a target, kupiga miss is to miss a target, and kupiga report is to report.
In summary, language change was significant to Hawaiian because the overthrow of the Queen and the creation of a new government, new laws made English the primary language. Language change was significant to Mughal by bringing Persian language mixed with Arabic and Hindu to create Urdu. Language change was significant to East Africa because colonization gave rise to a new language hierarchy in which the language of the colonizer was inscribed at the most prestigious language and came to dominate the administrative and mercantile structure of each colony. So we have two short answer questions. What is language? And describe an instance of language change and its significance to the culture area. And if you would like to learn more, we have links that you can read and sources on each of our topics.
Okay. Oh my god.
The freaking door.
I know. Okay, so now we sadly have to listen to us to make